The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Hepner. We are at the CropConnect Conference in Winnipeg and pleased to be joined by Dr. Steve Strelkov, professor at the University of Alberta. And Steve, where are we at when it comes to the clubroot situation across Western Canada? I know we keep finding new pathotypes. What's the count at so far?
Yeah, there definitely in the past year, growing season 2024 was quite good in terms of for the clubroot disease itself. There were quite a few new cases. We've been analyzing the number of pathotypes. We have about 55 confirmed pathotypes, though again, there's only a few that are really predominant. Many are rare, but some we're keeping an eye on because of their particular virulence patterns and so on. But definitely, we still are seeing this kind of proliferation or diversification of pathotypes. Yeah.
So is this a case of we're looking closer than we've ever looked before? Is that why we're finding it, or is it also spreading at the same time?
I think we've been looking at this and monitoring the disease for a long time now. So I think when we see either upticks or new proliferation of pathotypes, typically those are probably reflecting true biological events, simply because we've been more or less maintaining a similar level of surveillance for the last at least 15, close to 20 years. So it's allowed us to kind of track what's happening, and definitely that I think that proliferation of pathotypes is certainly a real kind of biological effect as the pathogen diversifies in terms of its virulence patterns.
Okay, so it's adapting in real time in front of us.
Yes, definitely. I think it is adapting and just changing as in response to what we do. It tries to match and does as well.
So the vast majority of cases, though, still in Alberta?
Yes, by far. The I would say over 90% of the cases are still in Alberta. So that province is still the hardest hit by far.
Okay. Which are the pathotypes that are most common or most prevalent? And are you seeing any change in the ones that are at the top of the list? Sure.
We definitely keep seeing two resistance-breaking pathotypes, 3A and 3D, which have been probably predominant since shortly after we found the first resistance-breaking cases. And then there's the original pathotype 3H that used to be the most common. It's still up there as probably the third most common. So between those three, maybe they represent about 60% of the cases. But we are keeping an eye on some pathotypes that are for instance, there's a few variants of pathotype 9, 9D, and 9E, which are fairly, they're still not that common, but they're a bit concerning because they can be highly virulent and maybe break some sort of resistance that 3A and 3D couldn't. But they're still quite restricted geographically, mainly between Edmonton and Calgary. So it's not like 3A and 3D that are and 3H, which are much more widespread.
Okay. How about from the seed variety selection side of things, from a farmer's perspective? Are we continuing to see new genetic advancement there as well in terms of fighting some of these pathotypes?
I certainly can't speak for the companies, but I do believe that breeding efforts are ongoing and they continue to release new products. And certainly there's multiple sources of resistance now available, and that can be helpful when you do have a pathotype or strain that has broken resistance in one host. That there may be products out there that may provide effective control against some of those new variants in terms of virulence.
When you look at the cases in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, do you feel that genetic resistance has been a key tool in keeping that number as low as it has stayed? There have been a few new cases over the years, but certainly not an explosion like is happening in Alberta.
Yes, certainly. I think Saskatchewan and Manitoba do have had the advantage that the disease in those provinces emerged maybe 6 or 7 years after it did in Alberta, and at the time that the first cases were found, for example, in Manitoba, there was already the first clubroot-resistant variety had been released, so that has probably helped to mitigate somewhat the spread and increase of clubroot in those provinces. Of course, there could also be environmental factors, for instance, soil pH and stuff that can play a role. But certainly, the fact that clubroot arrived here when in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, once more resistance tools were available, has helped probably to mitigate the impact of the disease for sure.
Finally, then, on the testing side of things, where are we at in terms of developing improved testing and understanding of how the pathotypes are changing?
Oh, yeah, we are working and along with others on looking at the genomics of the pathogen to try to understand variations like polymorphisms in the genome of different pathotypes and strains of the pathogen, and things like structural variations that may provide clues as to what's driving kind of the evolution or the emergence of these new pathotypes, but also they can be very useful from a diagnostics perspective if we can associate certain differences in the DNA to certain pathotypes that can help to advance what we call molecular pathotyping along those lines. Yeah.
Can that also help with variety selection or genetic resistance selection?
I think in the long run it will, because it will allow us, if we understand a little bit what the changes are in the pathogen that are resulting in its ability to break or overcome resistance, that could on the host side then be helped to inform, the breeders which genes might be effective against those strains, and maybe which could mitigate or slow down the development of new strains of the pathogen or new pathotypes. Yeah.
Well, we continue to follow it as it develops. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Thank you so much.